was something worse than jail. Judge Evans was right. These were no ordinary times. Yet they are largely left out of the typical high school American history book. There's always a chapter on the First World War, which tells us that the United States remained neutral in that conflict until German submarines began sinking American ships. Then, of course, we sent General Pershing and his millions of khaki-clad doughboys to Europe in their distinctive, broad-brimmed forest ranger hats. They fought valiantly at Chateau Thierry and Belleau Wood, helped win the war, and returned home to joyful ticker-tape parades. Turn the page, and the next chapter begins with the Roaring Twenties. Flappers, the Charleston, Prohibition, speakeasies, and Al Capone. This book is about what's missing between those two chapters. It is a story of mass imprisonments, torture, vigilante violence, censorship, killings of Black Americans, and far more that is not marked by commemorative plaques, museum exhibits, or Ken Burns documentaries. It is a story of how a war supposedly fought to make the world safe for democracy became the excuse for a war against democracy at home. The toxic currents of racism, nativism, red baiting, and contempt for the rule of law have long flowed through American life. People of my generation have seen them erupt in McCarthyism, in the rocks and insults hurled at Black children entering previously all-white schools, and in the demagoguery of politicians like Richard Nixon, George Wallace, and Donald Trump. By the time you listen to this, they may well have boiled up again in additional ways. My hope is that by examining closely an overlooked period in which they engulfed the country, we can understand them more deeply and better defend against them in the future. The struggle of man against power, wrote Milan Kundera, is the struggle of memory against forgetting. Never was this raw underside of our nation's life more revealingly on display than from 1917 to 1921. For instance, 21st century Americans are all too familiar with rage against immigrants and talk of fortifying the southern border. But this is nothing new. Major candidates for both the Republican and Democratic Party presidential nominations in 1920 campaigned on promises of mass deportations. And some people, including the Vice President of the United States, suggested going further. Why limit deportation merely to immigrants? Why not permanently expel troublemakers of every sort? Also during this period, Army machine gun nests appeared in downtown Omaha, and tanks on the streets of Cleveland, and armed troops patrolled many other American cities, from Butte, Montana to Gary, Indiana. The military crafted a secret 57-page contingency plan to put the entire country under martial law. During those 4 years, more than 450 people were imprisoned for a year or more by the federal government, and an estimated greater number by state governments merely for what they wrote or said. For the same reason, or simply for belonging to fully legal organizations, thousands of Americans, like those Tulsa Wobblies, were jailed for shorter periods, anywhere from a few days to a few months. Right-wing TV networks did not exist in 1917, but in that year was born a presidential tool even more powerful, a lavishly financed government propaganda agency that operated in every medium of the day. Films, books, posters, newspaper articles, and a corps of 75,000 speakers who gave more than 7 million talks everywhere from movie houses to revival tents. In addition, the federal government also attacked the press, both during and well after the First World War. It banned hundreds of issues of American newspapers and magazines from the mail, a fatal blow in an age before electronic media.